All right. Cool. Okay, so good evening, everybody. Welcome to Politics Prose Live. My name is Beth Wong. I'm an event coordinator at PNP, and we thank you so much for joining us here tonight to celebrate the release of Long Live the Post Horn by Vigdis Hjorth in partnership with the Embassy of Norway in Washington, D.C. At any time during our event tonight, you can click on the link, which I'm going to post in the chat, to purchase tonight's book on PNP's website. Your purchases are coming to the store at a very difficult time for small businesses across the country. And in addition to growing your own library, a book sale from Politics Prose means that we at the store are able to keep bringing you content like this, which we are so proud of and happy to bring to our community. You can ask the author a question tonight by submitting it into the Q&A box, which is found near the bottom of your screen. Be sure to submit your question in the Q&A and not in the chat to make sure our author and moderator sees it. On to the main event. In Long Live the Post Horn, we meet Eleanor, a 35-year-old media consultant who has not been feeling herself. She's not been feeling much at all lately. Far beyond jaded, she picks through an old diary and fails to recognize the woman in its pages, seemingly as far away from the world around her as she's ever been. But when her coworker vanishes overnight, an unusual new task is dropped on her desk. Off she goes to meet the Norwegian Postal Workers Union, setting the ball rolling on a strange and transformative 6 months. Vigdis Hjorth is joined tonight in conversation by Sheila Heti, author most recently of the novel Motherhood. Welcome, Vigdis and Sheila.
Thank you. Hi. I'm so happy to be interviewing you today, Vigdis. I love your books so much. I discovered them when I was in Oslo, and I asked a bookseller, who should I read? Which Norwegian writer must I read? And she gave me your book, A House in Norway, which was my first introduction to your writing. And I just can't wait till all your books are translated into English. So thank you for being here. We're going to talk about, I want to talk about A House in Norway and your new one, Long Live the Post Horn, and also Will and Testament. And there's so much to ask you. So I think I just want to start with this question, which is, these three books in any case are, for me, one of the things I love so much about them is that they're portraits of women alone. And the women, maybe they have children or they have boyfriends or co-workers, but in some fundamental way, emotionally and intellectually, they're isolated. They're sort of detached from the world that surrounds them. And there's some sort of struggle with the way that they don't belong. And I just am curious to ask you, what draws you to this character or this state of being, a feeling like you don't belong and that you're alone?
It's a little bit difficult to hear what you're asking, but you're asking me if they are isolated, these women, and why? Is that a question?
Well, what draws you to this character repeatedly?
Oh, it's so difficult it's something wrong with the technique, I guess.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
It's a little broken up.
Yes, but I can tell you about how what I think about Eleanor, the main character in Long Live the Post Horn. And I have been very inspired by the Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard, and he's talking about the people that are following all the written and unwritten rules in the society. They have a feeling of that they choose education, a partner, how to live, but in fact they're just pieces in the social machinery. That's what the machinery wants them to do. And then he's saying that so many people live in the basement of themselves, even though it's available rooms on the higher floors. And I want to to develop from the basement up to the higher floors. And it's very easy when I read certain but when I, and I have been so curious about how can I change my behavior in the world, and how to be together with other people and my relation to myself. And when I had kind of existential questions, I tried to write a novel to explore the question. So I wanted, I let on the first pages, this Eleanor, she goes to in her cellar, to basement, and find by accident her diary from years ago, 10 years ago. And then she can read that I went to the shop, bought a pair of shoes, maybe I'm going tomorrow, bought a jumper for mother's birthday, went to the cinema with Paul, had a date with John. And then she's surprised, is these the things I have, felt necessary to notice? Why? What I have bought? And then she has this thought, is thing different now? No, it's not. So I, as the writer, I pushed her into a crisis. And at the time, I was together with an PR consultant, and I could listen when what kind of automatic and mechanic and dead language he was using, talking to his clients. Adam, if you want to win your case in the media, you must have the media want conflict, there was identification. And then, I decided her to be a PR consultant, and that her had that kind of dead language. So I was pushing her. And when she, by accident, because I met a colleague of that boyfriend who was working with the EU's third directive, post directive. So I decided, if she's going to develop from the basement to the higher floor, she cannot help Dior or Lancome to sell perfume. She must work with the postal workers union.
Yes. And it's so interesting because there is a transformation in her, not because she has a great philosophical insight or a sense of the grandeur of life that connects her to everything, but because she's engaging in what she might have previously thought was sort of a trivial cause. And what I find so interesting about this book is that, so many journeys in literature are about finding something higher, than our daily lives. And we emerge from the basement because we connect to that higher thing. But for Eleanor, it's by engaging in this kind of what might seem boring political fight that she finds something worth living for. And I love that so much about the book, that it's not really about looking around and saying what is the most important thing, but whatever is in front of you is the most important thing. And can you hear me all right?
No, not really, not really. So it's so difficult to answer because I don't really hear you. It's a big distance between Toronto and Oscar in Oslo, I guess.
Yes.
But I can, yeah. But I can I can tell you something about my thoughts, because I decided the main character Eleanor, to have this kind of mechanical, automatic, dead language. But when, because I have pushed her into a crisis, when she start to talk as she always talks to these new clients. When she's looking into the faces of the postal workers, she realizes this is real. They are afraid. It's not a communication game, it's reality. And then suddenly she moves very slowly into a real engagement in this, and it seems maybe like a minor thing, a little trivial directive among other more important. But for Eleanor, it's the first time in a long time that she feels that she is engaged in anything. She has and feel that to fight together with the postal workers, that gives her a kind of feeling of meaning and reason to live, and that's a very new feeling for her. Can you hear what I'm saying?
I can. Yes, and is also you have this refrain. It's in Will and Testament, but it comes up several times. She says, "Once I started to understand my life," and this idea of understanding one's life, it relates to her as well, because Eleanor only begins to understand her life when she is fighting for the postal workers and using a language that's real. And I wonder about this phrase, like, what sort of understanding of one's life would you say is the kind that makes a person more alive or belong more? Because the kind of she had an understanding of her life before, but it was a kind of quotidian, superficial understanding. So what's the sort of understanding of one's life that the characters are after, would you say? In both Will and Testament.
Søren Kierkegaard, he insists that to be an ordinary, deadly human being is a gift and a vote of confidence from the higher powers, because he's a very religious thinker or philosopher, but I can use it even though I'm not religious. And he says also it's a task and an adventure. And the adventure is not to be president in the United States or to travel all over the world or a lot of erotic affairs. It's to be the ordinary person you are. And you have written about this in one way in your first novel, and to just be you, and it's a task and a huge responsibility. So we should be grateful to be alive, and thanks the gods of the powers that we can be living for a short time on this earth. And that we should do that where we are, exactly as we are and where we are, with all our passion and all our responsibility. So maybe before, Eleanor maybe has thought that to be a complete person, human being, or a successful human being, she should be, rich or very beautiful or have an extraordinary career or partner or travel somewhere extraordinary. But to find out that I have to embrace my life and my situation with passion and responsibility where I am. So, she's she stops dreaming about, other things, but, she's confronting her reality. That's what I think. It's easier to do in a novel and on the paper and than to do it in real life. But if we try hard, we can, it's he writes a place that if you are a drunk, an alcoholic, and then if you want to develop or to get out of it, you must accept that you are an alcoholic. You cannot be yourself only when you are sober. You must accept yourself as an alcoholic before you can change anything. You have to start with accepting the person you are, not lie to yourself. So he wants us to have a kind of an honest self conversation. That's how I read him. And I think that Eleanor, before she finds this diary and in her work, she don't have that self conversation with herself, and she's not honest, I think.
There's a character in the book, Helga, who is a teacher of school children, and she asks the children to write an essay, and the subject of the essay is, "Why am I unhappy?" And this causes a sort of revolution in the children, and the parents are very threatened by it. And I feel like, in a sense, Helga is an artist, not just a teacher, but she's an artist because she creates the conditions for transformation in the students. And I was comparing her in my head to Alma, the textile artist in Long Live in A House in Norway. And to me, Alma is actually an artist, but her tapestries, she hangs one in the high school and the students don't really know what to make of it. They aren't moved by it. And I just wanted to talk to you about the kind of artist that self-identifies as an artist, but doesn't create any effect in the recipient of the art, versus this teacher who asks them, "Why are you unhappy?" And that changes them. So is there something in the kind in being an artist that can be a sort of performance that doesn't affect other people, like Alma, versus the kind of artist who doesn't identify as an artist, but who's the teacher that changes the lives of these people forever? What's the difference?
Yeah. Yes, I think that artists, maybe, even though they claim to be honest, and they can lie to themselves about who they are, because they have this, picture of themselves in investigation, all things. But of course, that Alma, she thinks, her opinion about herself is that she's tolerant, she is left wing thinker. She's in her work she's because I think she's making she's embroidering a kind of wall, what do you call it, what you hang on the wall, about the celebration of 100 years of the Norwegian Constitution. And then she's very concerned about how the poor people, how the condition for the poor people before, and she has this, she has a lie about herself as a kind of human good person. But of course, in the conflict with the tenant, she has this, when the tenant don't want to pay the rent, then she has this feeling of, this house is mine, it's mine. And she has the feeling that when they are living there without paying, there are a kind of abuse against her, and they are stealing her money. That's the feeling. And of course, she's you know, she observes herself this reaction, and this reaction is surprising her. And then, of course, I hope she's changing her self-conversation after that. But I think that Helga, as you mentioned, that when she don't have pretensions at all, she's just, you know, not a simple, what do you say, a simple person, just an ordinary teacher, a young teacher. So she's wiser in a way, because she don't have these lying images of herself. But it's a very good point. I haven't thought about it before.
Yeah, I mean, there's a kind of, also, you said in another interview that, you know, because Norway is such a wealthy country that takes care of its citizens in a lot of ways, it has a self-image as a place where there's, the people are good, it's a good country. This is a point of view that many people around the world share about Norway. But I feel like one of the things that you're interested in doing in your books is to show the hypocrisy of this, that the society can have all kinds of quiet violence that's masked by, you know, having a very generous social safety net and so on. And the violence is really in the citizens. I mean, the violence of Alma against her tenant is this kind of violence. And you know, I'm just curious if you want to talk a little bit about that, because you've also said that many Norwegian writers don't deal with politics. They deal with personal relationships and the aesthetic, because politically it feels like a place, politically Norway feels like a place where you can sort of ignore the politics because things basically work pretty well. But you're not content as a writer to say things are working well here. How are your books received in Norway in terms of your criticisms of Norwegian society?
No, I think that the tradition, I didn't hear the whole question, but I try to answer the last part. I think that we have a tradition for the Norwegian literature has a tradition to be critical to the society and the government. And they have always, especially the female writers, have been shown. We have a long, proud tradition of female writers, you know, have the light in where the children and women have lived in silence and darkness. So, you know, the first modern novel, the critic modern novel in Norway was written by Camilla Collett in 1854 and 55, where it was, you know, she was defending the marriage of love, not the marriage of convenience. And it was a scandal, of course. And then we had Amalie Skram, who wrote about female alcoholism and about the childish bride that was married to a sea captain who had been, you know, in every harbor all over the world, and how their unlike the difference in the sexual experience was destroying the marriage. And then we have that has written about illegal abortion. Sigrid, the Nobel Prize winner, that was her first sentence in her first novel in 1907 was, "I've been unfaithful to my husband." And it was a scandal because women were, per definition, not unfaithful. So all these women have been very critical to the society and the special to the condition of the women and children. So that we have a long tradition for that. So it's you know but I just want to say something as well, that the Norwegian society is a very good society, and we have a very strong state that helps people when they suffer, of course, but also the new liberalism is coming into Norway, and that's why the fight against the third EU's third post directive was a kind of symbolic fight, because they now want to privatize everything, the trains, the postal, because you don't admit that to create a postal system is a kind of is building civilization. It's nothing you do to earn money. So we have to fight because the pressure on our state and what we call a welfare state, it's so strong. So it's I think there's a lot of writers in Norway who wants to keep it, because we have been so and heterogeneous and equal society with not much violence and criminality. But that will change when we have more and more poor people, and that the postal workers cannot, even though they are work. Or just now we have a bus strike in Norway, because you can't, even though you work 8 or 10 or 12 hours as a bus driver, you can't pay your bills, because it's not the state driving the bus, so and companies, it's those people that want to earn money. So we are under pressure. So I try with my literature to do don't liberalize me, but there are strong forces, international forces, that want us to
Can we talk also a little bit about the form of your books, or the sentences in particular? You do something very unusual. When you write your sentences, it seems to me like in many places where there would be a period, there's a comma. So there's this series of thoughts and events within the same sentence that I haven't seen a writer do before. And I wonder if you can tell me where that came from, that way of writing that puts. Do you know what I'm talking about? It's hard to communicate through this Zoom thing today.
Yes, and because I hear one year one word, and then I don't hear the next one. That's difficult. But if you can hear me now, so I can try to. When you ask that the thoughts and events in the same sentence, was it something like that you asked about? Yes.
Yeah.
It's difficult, because I write kind of on intuition, so it's difficult. I haven't thought about it like that, but of course that I'm in my main character's head a lot, and so that what it's often what she's experience, the voice of the novel experience it together with her, similarity with her in a way. But I think that a thing like, and what do you call it, to have fart, to be fast, to have what do you call it, when you are running, you have speed.
The pace.
Mm-hmm.
Your pace.
Yeah, when you drive a car, the car has a speed, kind of speed. I often want my my literature to have a kind of speed. It's just coming that to me. I'm so often when I'm writing, when I have this feeling of, then I'm thinking, it's a kind of energy and coming from me, I think, into the prose. I hope that I have that feeling. So I often, I want to come to the point where, it's, fluent. It's, it's taking me away.
Mm-hmm. Also, I have another question. You've written about 20 novels. And, at what point in that process over the years do you start to feel, if you have felt, like what your themes are? Do you know what I mean? Like after a certain number of novels, you must have a sense of this is what, when you write, you show yourself what you're interested in. You don't always know what you're interested in until you're writing it. But then after novel upon novel upon novel, I would think that there's a sense of, well, there's a boundary around my interest. Like there's certain things I am interested in and there's certain things that I'm not. And how does one write 20 novels with this awareness of the limitations of one's interests? Like I'm feeling that after only having written three novels, like there's a kind of despair about, oh, I can see my limitations, How do you do that after 10, 15 novels?
I didn't hear your question. It's too it's so difficult. But you asked what you are asking me about how if I write differently now from before after a lot of novels, or
yeah, because at the beginning you don't know who you are as a writer. At the beginning you don't know what you're interested in. You're just discovering it. But after 20 years of writing or 15 years, So how is writing a novel different when you know so much about your interests versus at the beginning of your career when you're just figuring it out?
Yeah, no, I could hear every word. That was very nice. No, it's that's connected to life, I think, because I always try to explore a question or a dilemma, a moral dilemma that's my own, but I wouldn't write a novel about it if I didn't think that it was a moral dilemma or a question that other people were dealing with. So I try to explore. So I always start where it burns in myself. And I'm sorry to say that it burns everywhere in my life all the time. So it's a lot of things I want to explore because I don't understand my own reactions. I suddenly have a conflict with one of my children, or with a friend, or with a lover, and all these things the questions are new. I feel that the question or the dilemma I want to explore choose the form of the novel, choose the language. So I think that maybe if my life was much more, or I don't know. So I think that I think to me each novel is kind of new for me, new travelers to go somewhere I haven't been before, and that's why what's nice as well. But I think that I'm a little bit more brave now than I was young. I tried the questions I asked myself for the novel is more difficult and complex than before. I think maybe, I hope so. But can I say something that was very, it was so nice to read this book of you, and because you are writing about whether the main person is talking about herself and discuss with herself and all others about if she is going to be a mother or not. And my last novel, which has just been out for a few weeks in Norway, it's called Is Mom Dead? And it's about the mother. It's a kind of study in the mother that we have to deal with, whether we are mothers ourselves or not. So it was so interesting, and I get so many, I should have read it before I wrote my own, because I stolen a lot of things from it and put into my very clever sentences. So it was a very nice reading. And this one as well, because how should a person be? I don't know if that's the English.
Yeah.
Yeah. How should a person be? And it's very. I haven't seen that kind of novel before. It's very nice between the what kind of essayistic parts and more traditional novelistic part, and also that kind of conversations just without context. And so it was very nice reading. I had it very nice this last week reading them.
Thank you. I think you and I both have a favorite writer in Kierkegaard. I mean, for me, he's also extremely important. And the idea of using literature to ask, as a philosophical, to ask philosophical questions, to ask that through literature seems to me so exciting. And it's what, for when I read him, he's, if I read his Diary of a Seducer, he's a novelist there.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's it's an excellent language artist. Yeah. So that's why, a lot of Christian people, because he was a Christian in one way or the other, they don't like him because it's too. He has a lot of images and examples, and it's very down to earth as well. But I asked a professor once, because I was leading a discussion about Søren Kierkegaard, and I asked this professor in the history of ideas, and who is an expert on Kierkegaard, and I said, was he a Christian? And then he said, no, he was not a Christian, but he called what he believed in. He called that Christianity in a way. But so I love his, when he has a lot of religious speeches, in the notes, in the notes, which are not part of the real speech, there are so many funny examples. So I really get very inspired reading him, not only thinking about him. And a philosopher then Wittgenstein, I don't know if you are interested in him, but he was the translation of Søren Kierkegaard into German, because he was a German philosopher. But he thinks that even though in his diaries, he writes so much about Kierkegaard, he's quarreling with Kierkegaard, because Kierkegaard, to him, he is too, what you call in Norwegian, we say, flowerful, when he writes, and a lot of picture, and he getting away from the real case, or what you call it, to very inspired. And Wittgenstein, he was totally different in his way of writing, 2 sentences.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I agree with you. He's a literary genius, Søren Kierkegaard. That's why it's so interesting to read him.
Absolutely. We'll go soon to the questions that the audience have sent us, but I just want to ask one thing about Will and Testament, because this book is so powerful and brilliant. And for those who don't know, it's the story of a woman who has a completely different reality from everyone else in her family. Her father sexually abused her, and nobody in the family will accept this story. And it's, for me, about how among other things, it's about how parents create the family story. And if the children have a different story, that story is not accepted. And it's a very painful book to read for that reason. So I know after you published this novel in Norway, your sister in real life wrote a book saying that your novel was not true. I mean, of course, your novel's a novel. So, but to me, the irony of your sister doing that is it's a repetition of what happens in the book, which is that the narrator in the book, her story is constantly being suppressed by her sister. And in real life, you as an author wrote this novel, and the same thing happened to you. Your sister said, my sister's story is not legitimate. And I think that's so, I just wonder how you respond to a work of art being treated as though it's a memoir or something that it's not, and how can you convince the world that what you've done is literature as opposed to confession, if we say that confession is not literature, but I think it's something different.
Yeah, if I understand you right, that you ask me how it has been that some people has read the novel as it was a kind of confession. Is that and how it has been for me? Okay, yeah. Now I was surprised. I was really surprised because, you know, for example, Karl Ove Knausgård, he uses names of existing people. I have never done that in my novels. And also he has said claimed in interviews that this is the truth. Of course, because he's an intelligent man, he means that it's my truth, of course. But still he claims to tell the truth, even though it's his truth. But I have never done that when I talked about my Will and Testament in the newspapers or being interviewed. I've always talked about it as a novel, and it is a novel. It's a literary construction. You cannot, and even though what you will say is autobiographical book in 400 pages will be a literary construction. So I think it's not interesting to compare a novel to the reality, the so-called reality, because there's a transformation from life to literature. When that said, authors have always been using their own life, their own experience. It's not possible not to do that, and it's a long tradition of that. But maybe it's the surrounding of the novels which has changed, because now you have Facebook, you have blogs. People can come home, they have eaten some dinner, they've been to a cinema, and they can just throw up what I have in a blog. This is, and then maybe and you have the reality shows on TV, and suddenly the the glasses you read a novel through has been reality, has, you know, from reality glasses, reality show glasses, and the blogs. But of course, that everybody who has written a novel know it's not coming and throw something up from reality. Literature is language and construction.
I totally agree. Can you see the Q&A function in Zoom down at the bottom of our screen? Because I'd like to read you some of these questions, but maybe if you read alongside me, that's better.
Yeah, there's a button at the bottom of the screen that says Q&A that you can click on and you can read the questions.
What?
I think let's start with the question at the bottom. Linda has a question. She asks, what writing schedule do you use? Do you write from 10 to 2? Do you write every day? You know, do you have a goal per day? Like what's your actual work life like? That's her question.
You know, I don't have that kind of routine, but when I'm writing, when I'm in the middle of a novel, I can write everywhere. I can write on the airport, on the airplane. I can not write when I drive a car, but you know, so when I sleep as long as I want, when I wake up in the morning or during the day, I go to the machine and start writing. And I write as long as I want to, take a glass of wine, writing more. But of course, as to survive economically as a writer, I have to, you know, do things like this, go to interviews, to have speeches, all that kind of things. But when I'm in the middle of a novel, I can write in my hotel room after the event is finished. So it's the big difference is when I'm in a novel and when I'm not. Just at the moment, because I'm not in a novel. And I miss it so much to be in a novel. I think I survive by being in a novel. I can go to my best friend and to throw up my feelings and discuss them with the novel. So at the moment, I feel a little bit lost because I don't have somewhere to go. But you know, I have started doing something. So I guess I have a lot of traveling to do now in Norway, of course, not abroad. But in 2 weeks, I'll start on something, and I have some ideas. But I don't have, you know, I don't looking on my watch when or I'm not a very structured person.
I'm the same way. I can understand that structured way of working, but somehow, yeah. And the time between working on novels is terrible. You don't feel like a full human being. It feels like you're just half living. So I'm happy to hear you're about to start a new novel. There's a question from McKenna Goodman. She says, your books are complex and have such velocity, and yet they are also fairly seamless to read. Yet they compel one to turn page after page. You never talk down to your reader, and you make complex philosophy available. Is it important to you that your work be available to many readers in this way? Is it important to you that your novels are received by the critics as having philosophical depth? Can a writer do both? So how important is it that the books be readable to anybody? And how important is it that the critics recognize that there's so much more to the books than it seems perhaps on the surface from being so readable?
Yeah, of course, I hope they'll recognize that. But you know, I've been published so many books, and you know, I was very young. I was a kind of, because I was writing as you are as well. but it was not that usual when I was 22, 23. A lot about erotics and how to, it, some critic read it as about sex and erotic, but to me it was, how can a man and a woman meet? Can they meet, really meet? Because they are different. They are, so it's how to live together. It's the main question. And when you are young, of course, sexual meetings and how to live together with a man or the people that you are in love with and have sex with. It's difficult, and it's very vulnerable and also very painful. But then, a lot of critics, they called me an erotic writer, and that was, it was kind of, and I couldn't fight against it because it was so tiring. So I was just, uh, I stopped reading the critics very seriously. I just had to do my things. And but now I think that, they don't call me erotic writer anymore because I'm 60 years, but from that time, I don't read the critics sentence for sentence. I have the overview. And I'm very happy for the people that I feel understand my novels, but I'm not, the others I don't care that much about, because it's vulnerable to be a writer, to read, to have um, your work, or, you have the, what you call it, your work everybody writes about your work, and it's public. It's kind of, you must have a distance to that. I try to have a distance to that, and after a lot of years I have a distance to that, if that was a kind of answer.
That's a great answer. Here's a question from Natasha Gilmore. She says, does shopping and materialism signify something specific about our modern condition that keeps us in our basement? Eleanor's comments about material comforts and the projects she works on before postcom seem to point at something material that blocks us from making our way to the attic. Yeah, could you talk about that? Do you understand the question? What is it about materialism that keeps us in the basement, and shopping, and because obviously when Eleanor reads her diary, it's just, I bought these shoes, I went here. So is there something about about materialism that keeps us in the basement? I think that's the question.
I didn't hear that. I didn't hear that question. I'm sorry.
Is there something about shopping and materialism and what they signify that in our modern life that keeps us in our basement, that prevents us from transcending, from living richer, the richer life that Eleanor discovers at the end of the book?
Oh yeah, you're talking about Eleanor now, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And her to develop from the basement to the end of the book.
Yeah, and is there something about shopping and materialism that is a problem in the contemporary life, so that we can't feel connected to other people, to what's important? Is there something about that prevents us? I think that's what the question is.
I don't understand. It's the voice. The sound is very. So I don't.
Do you see in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen the first question from Natasha? Can you open that?
I don't.
I'm going to try and share my screen so that you can. I'm going to try and share.
How can I open?
Oh, can you read it? Do you see it?
No, how can I find it?
One
Participants? Do I have to?
No. I'll here. Gonna try this.
Chat? Do I have to take on chat or?
No, not chat, Q&A. But now,
Can you see it?
this question here.
I can't see any questions.
Oh dear.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
But I can hear you now. Maybe you can read it again. No.
Like, does shopping and materialism signify something specific about our modern condition that keeps us in our basement?
Yes. Okay, I understand. Yes, I think so. I think so. That it's if we go in, I have a little cabin in the woods. When I go there, live very simply, listen to the birds, seeing the trees, go deep into the woods, fishing in a lake, sleeping out during the night. My feeling of existence is so strong. So, my 1 week in that cabin is like a month in the town, going from shopping and wanting, and you have this, that my eyes are, into the windows of the shops. I can, beautiful things, beautiful shoes, beautiful thing. And it's so, I'm traveling away from myself and I don't have that feeling. And even though if I, go in, buy something, I have this feeling of shame afterwards because I didn't really needed what I just used money on. So it's, I think that the materialism is, it's destroying us and the earth as well. So I think that, try to live more simply, but it's very difficult. But the forces that want us to buy to keep the will going, they are so strong. So it's difficult, but still I want to claim that the little revolution that Eleanor does is important, and that it's possible to do some changes in your own life. So you don't have to be so dependent on the politicians, that you can change your perspective on your life and your attitude toward other people. That's possible, and it's, of course, I want people to take care, to be political active and discuss political questions and to join organizations, all that kind of things. But still, what you can do with your own attitude and your perspective upon yourself and others, that's you could do that for free. It can cost energy and intelligence, but you don't have to pay for that. You can just change your way of living and your attitude toward life and others.
Well, I think we've spoken for an hour. Thank you so much. I hope that we can be in the same room one day and continue this conversation. It's been such a pleasure to hear everything that you have to say, and I can't wait for your new books to be translated. And what a gift to talk to you today. Thanks you so much. And it's so nice that it was just you to ask me questions. And as you know, I know who I'm going to give these 2 books to, but I want them back again.
So thank you very much. It was very nice to meet you and speaking to you, reading you. Thanks you. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you
for
so
everyone
much.
for coming. Thanks to our audience and Politics and Prose, and yeah.
No, thank you so much, both of you. I do apologize to everybody involved for the difficulty technically tonight. It just is kind of an inevitable truth of this, pandemic that we're living through. But nevertheless, it was a beautiful conversation, and it was such a treat to hear two fabulous authors speak with each other. So thank you to Vigdis Hjorth, to Sheila Heti, to the Embassy of Norway in Washington for playing parts in this lovely event. Again, you can go to the link that I've posted up in the chat to purchase Long Live the Post Horn from Politics and Prose. And we hope that you're all staying well and staying well read. Good evening, everybody. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.